Amanda Goodall, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is quite a departure from my usual stuff. My audience is pretty, I've got a bunch of wide topics, and we delve into a whole bunch of different things. This is personal to me since I work in tech. My audience does know that, and so why don't you, real quick, give people an overview, kind of who you are and what you do?
Yeah. I'm Amanda Goodall, the job chick. I've been the job chick for the last 20 years. This isn't a new thing. I've worked with over 25,000 directors and executives over the years on their career path. In the last like 5, 10 years, I've really focused on what is going on behind the scenes. I've heard all the stories, all the stuff I'm sure I'm not supposed to know. So I love it. But now I really look behind the scenes at the workforce data. So when companies are reporting PR or their earnings, or you have a CEO talking about the narrative or whatever it's going to be, I go look and go, I don't know if that's right. And I go look at the workforce. And I can tell you right now, 9 out of 10 times, it is not what is actually happening behind the scenes. So whether they're talking about AI pivots or anything like that, they're restructuring. Um, it's not usually that. So it's an interesting thing to kind of look at. And, I work with a lot of investors and legal teams on what is actually going on, because another one of the things that I do is I predict layoffs about 3 to 6, even 9 months ahead of time sometimes. So working on one with Google right now. As you mentioned tech, there's something in the works going on there. But right now we're fresh off of, gosh, all the big ones this summer, from Microsoft to Amazon and things like that. So it's wild times out there. It really is.
It's been brutal, and I'm telling you, from the inside, it's opaque to us, and I see a lot of people who when you talk to people that are in tech, people assume we know what's going on. We have no clue. We've got some tools, right? We have Blind, that application that sort of lets people, for people aren't aware, it lets you sort of post anonymously about what's going on in your company. But 80% of that is people trolling and intentionally putting out misleading information. So it's just this ball of anxiety in my industry right now. So it's really great that we've got somebody like you, because I know a lot of people on the inside across multiple tech companies, they look to your account because you do predict the layoffs, and that's one of the things that most people are worried about right now. So quick question, without divulging your sources and everything, like, how do you know? How are you getting this early access to the information? Because I can tell you what I feel like. I've been in my company for 13 years, and I've got a vast network of quote unquote spies. People that are in the know in various finance orgs and HR orgs, like, and I still can't get half as much information as you get. So I want to know, like, how do you know this?
Yeah, if I tell you all my secrets, I'd have to kill you, and I don't want to do that. So, what I really look at as I'm looking at the, like I said, the behind the scenes, what is actually the structure of each org within a company. And like I said, companies, they do not tell the public what is actually going on. They just don't. And I would say, especially in tech and probably also in finance, I would say this next statement holds true, that you guys are told this itty bitty fraction about what's going on. And I would say even like the higher ups, the VPs, going into L7s, whatever, in certain companies, they don't even know. And that's why it's a big surprise. I mean, the Microsoft one, for instance, people were getting laid off and their directors were already gone. So they had some random VP and an HR person just script reading the, hey, you're laid off things, because the person didn't even know. And their VP didn't even know they were getting laid off, or that their team was getting laid off. So, it is a case of really looking at the structure behind the scenes and seeing what companies are building, what they're doing. I have that data. And it's out there, and that's, if you know me, if you're on my X, I'm not really big on the government data, because I don't believe those
Yeah.
numbers. It just doesn't match up, and it doesn't tie up to what I see. And the crazy thing is that if these companies would just report this data, we would actually know what their real unemployment numbers are and who's actually getting hired. So it's wild that it doesn't exist, but yeah, it is really the case of what is the actual headcount. And especially when you have companies that are saying, oh, hey, we still have the same headcount. We saw that again after Microsoft. Oh, no, we have the headcount has remained relatively unchanged. That is his exact quote. And that is true. And that happens a lot. And, so people are like, where are the jobs? And it is a case that they are going to outsource, offshoring, nearshoring. And that is why here in the US, we are not having the jobs that we are. But again, this is all part of that, org structure and how it's built, how they change, how it ebbs and flows. And if you're in tech, you understand, all of a sudden you'll randomly have a team get shifted into something else, and that just means that they've shut off one org and they've moved somebody over here and it looks good because the headcount's still up there, right? So yeah, it's fun. It's fun to dig through the data and actually see what's going on. It's harder to look at outsourcing, offshoring because they don't have to report that at all. No companies have to report that. And so finding those numbers, that is about dealing with PRs and things like that. But everything else is just, yeah, just the workforce information.
Yeah, so I know what this is, but maybe some of my listeners won't. Can you tell us the difference between offshoring, outsourcing, and near sourcing?
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
nearshoring? Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I say the same thing. I do that all the time. So nearshoring. Let's start with that one. That is something that most people don't ever talk about. They don't ever hear about. Now, that's basically like saying, let's just say it's the US and maybe they nearshore to Mexico or to Brazil. It's closer. It's not the Chinas, the Indias. That's your level of offshoring, something that's way further away. And then outsourcing is basically where they bring in a company like Wipro or Accenture or anything like that, Infosys, as well for tech. And they basically say, okay, we have these projects. We need this done. Can you sort it? They hire the people. It's under that company. Accenture has 800,000 employees. And this all kind of gets taken care of by these other companies, but it's for that tech company. And it's usually tech. All industries use it, but tech is the main proponent for outsourcing. So there's a lot of different ways that, companies have employees and they have a big headcount. It's just not all in the States, for instance.
What do you think's driving that? 'Cause I've seen that similar shift, and I want to get your take on what do you think is driving that? Because this can't be organic. It's been too sudden, right?
It has actually been pretty sudden. I mean, we've always had outsourcing and offshoring, and that's always been. I mean, we know China is the manufacturing capital of the world, right? We know it exists, and right now there's a lot of talk about H-1Bs here in the U.S. with the visas. I mean, we've all seen it. It is a big, big topic right now, but that is honestly a distraction. What is actually happening with corporations right now? I'm really watching the pattern of what they do. And I coined the phrase the corporate revolution because everybody thinks of a revolution as, the people rising up against the government, right? Well, basically what we're having right now is corporates just rising up against what's going on and the general structure of how things have always been. And they're like, wait a minute, I can do this. Nobody can stop me. And as long as I stay within regulations, it works. So that is what we are seeing. And why are they doing it? It margins. At the end of the day, it's margins and keeping shareholders happy. And, it is, we are seeing this excessive. I mean, look at the stock market. It is truly getting out of hand. We have, whether I help a lot of investors, and a lot of people that have been displaced by jobs. They're like, I can't find a job. They trade under my data. So I'm not against what's going on, but if you're not going to get hired by a company, then make them work for you as a shareholder. That's my way of thinking about it. But they are focused on what's going on. So these the market caps that are going out there, the stock prices that are just flying high and wild right now when it's not normal. When you announce a layoff, the stock price goes up. What? you know, that's not historically the norm. And then, when a company reports their earnings down, I mean, Meta was just a teeny tiny bit down. They like crashed it. I'm just like, y'all, come on. But, it really is down to the shareholder concept right now and what companies are being able to do. And they're focusing on making sure that they can produce as cheap as possible, and that includes how many people they have. That includes how much they pay their headcount, and making the biggest profit possible. That's what it is. I mean, that's kind of business 101, really, but it sucks right now with the way the optics are.
Yeah, it does. It feels like something is majorly wrong in the market from a fundamentals standpoint. I think I know what it is. I'm an econ nerd. Seeing, like you said, these corporate profits going through the roof, stock price going through the roof, but completely disconnected from everything else fundamentally in the economy. The housing market is absolutely in the toilet. The job market is in the toilet. You look at the car repossessions, like it's going through the roof at 2008, 2009 levels. Like all of the underlying fundamentals with the economy are completely unsound. Yet we still see, corporate earnings go up, and I don't really know what to make of it. But it's definitely a thing, and it's causing people in my industry a lot of anxiety because, as you mentioned, if you are one of these people that's unfortunate enough to have the layoff thing hit you, boy, I'm seeing a lot of people I know on LinkedIn that have been looking for 6, 7, 9, 12 months and still can't find a job. And that's never been the way it was. Like I've been in tech a very long time. It was just super easy to slide into a new role. Oftentimes it'll be a level up as you go. And it's just not, that's not the environment we're in anymore.
It's absolutely not. Here's the scary part. If somebody's getting laid off right now, the chances of them getting a job in 26 is actually pretty slim. And if they do, it's going to be probably Q4 of 26. We're talking a whole year. I know, the federal data is saying, oh, it's on average, I think it's what, 24, 25 and a half weeks now. Who knows with the shutdown? Who knows what the numbers they make up? But we really are seeing people, like you said, it is that 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 plus months. And I've talked to people that have been out for well over a year or two because of what they do. And just because the way, companies are changing, they're changing the structure of jobs. Specialization is the new, key phrase. I'm sure you hear it a lot. I mean, XAI just did their big purge, because they didn't need generalists anymore. They needed specialists. And we are starting to see this change where, companies are starting to look for these people that can do very specific roles. And I was just at Money 2020 last week, which is the biggest fintech conference in the world. And it was actually pretty fascinating. Everything that they were talking about was all agentic AI. And they're like, we don't actually know how it's going to work yet. So, they were pretty open to go, this is really cool. But they also know what they're going to be doing. They're like, no, this is actually going to help, one person's going to be able to handle, 200 plus agents. And, which is an interesting concept, but they're like, nobody we have right now is actually trained for that. So that is one of those things where, as we, as people, especially in tech, do get displaced, my advice is focus on the specialization. Whether, you're going to jump industries, still stay in tech, but maybe jump, sectors and things like that. See what they're doing with agentic and really start focusing on those specialization roles, because the chances are you can do it. You just got to tell them, and it's not going to be what's on your resume. It's not going to be your past history. They're not going to know that. So you need to be able to just kind of speak to them in their own new world language of what they're doing. But yeah, there's a lot of changes, and it's sad and it's frustrating to see people be out of jobs for so long because they are to another point of, I don't know what to do. I just made a post here earlier. 38% of US workers are now doing gig work. And I mean, that's not stability at all. Even if you're driving Uber, 20 hours a day, that is not a stable career. And when you have door dashers that are being turned away because their area is so oversaturated, and we're seeing that in some of the bigger cities right now, what do you do after that? And those are some of the little things that we have to look at to see where this is going to go. There's going to be some good sectors in 2026 for sure, defense, aerospace, things like that. Tech, man, that's a tough area right now. And 2027, I'd say it's probably going to start getting better, but it's still going to be a rough year.
Do you have any predictions about how the Federal Reserve, as it begins its easing program, how that's going to impact this? Because I see
Yeah.
two things. The reason I'm asking this is I
Yeah.
see a couple of things. There's about 7.5, almost $8 trillion parked in money market accounts right now. And as those yields evaporate, when the Fed starts dropping interest rates, that money is going to go looking for yield somewhere else. And historically, that has been this huge flight out of money markets into equities. And then you start to see these sort of bubbles and manias going crazy. And I'm like, yo, we are in a massive AI bubble right now that's getting
We're
ready to pop.
there.
So I'm kind of like, what is coming in the next year and a half? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I absolutely do. A lot of people, and traditionally, when, the Fed kicks in and starts doing their thing, companies will start, getting bigger loans, start growing, and start that scaling again. See that growth. So we see growth in jobs as well. This is not what's happening. And like you said, we're already in that giant, whatever you want to call it, bubble, corporate bubble of, everything that is weirdly not going right. But that's a whole nother conversation. But, I do think what we are going to see is companies not focusing on this job growth. I mean, we have so many right now that are like, yep, we're going to stay lean. We're going to stay flat. Walmart, we're not hiring for 5 years. But it doesn't mean that they're not still growing. They're not still gaining in serious revenue, but they are building their data centers, their warehouses, they're offshoring, they're figuring out how to outsource for cheaper. We are seeing McDonald's even is building a whole focus down in Mexico City. So that's that nearshoring concept. I had somebody the other day actually message me. It was a few people actually. That's what made me just go, "Are you actually serious? This is happening?" They were let go. They were part of a layoff. It wasn't like a big layoff at McDonald's, but they were part of a layoff. And the person that offboarded them was in Mexico City doing it.
Mm.
Come on. So what companies are focusing on is building cheaper elsewhere. So if that's in India, if that's in China, if that's in Mexico, wherever it happens to be, that's where the money's going to go. So will they lend? Sure. They don't need to. They have trillions, but they will because they can put it all into that. And so, yeah, I'm not expecting at all to see like some kind of massive, significant, relevant growth in jobs here in the US because of that, because they can do it for cheaper elsewhere. Why would they hire here? And that's kind of where we're at. So they want to use the excuse of AI. That is this year's excuse. Last year it was restructuring. The year before that, it was, oh, oops, we overhired after the pandemic. What's next year going to be? I don't know yet. I don't know. Just, we like outsourcing. I have no idea.
Yeah, and it's not good for the everyday people. It's this disconnect and where the uber elites are making all of the money and the gap between, the income and the wealth gap. It just seems to continue to grow. And we've got and I'm not political. I'm not part of any team. I just try to analyze things objectively. So just take it for what it's worth. Like I see what Donald Trump has done to be incredibly damaging, right? Because not only his first term inflationary policies, which hell, he tripled the M2 money supply during his first term, and that sort of is continued on, and we haven't hit the brakes. The BBB, the big beautiful bill. We're going to cut spending. It's good. We're going to, and I think what's happened is like we've just sort of given up. I think the country is just like, screw it. We're going to print money till infinity until the US dollar collapses, and that's what's going to happen. On top of that, we've implemented the largest tax increases in non-wartime in US history by virtue of tariffs. People always say, "Oh, the foreigners pay." It's like, no, they don't. That's paid by the importer of record at the port of entry. These are taxes on Americans, right? And there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of PR about, oh, they're going to invest every time he goes overseas. Oh, they're investing $2 trillion, and like, no, they're not. Like, if you know what's actually going on, this is PR, this is fluff. That's not coming here, and they continue to outsource and they continue to push jobs overseas, and the little guy continues to get hurt, and it seems like we're entering a pretty dark period.
Yeah. Yeah. This is not something, and I deal with a lot of like economists. I'm on the Finance Daily Show on X every morning at 5 a.m., which is really early to talk about this stuff. But, it's interesting. They always give me pushback on it, just saying, well, we've had the least amount of tech layoffs for years. And that is true. You know why? Because the last couple of years, they have not been hiring in the US. They're hiring abroad. And for some reason, so many economists that just want to read the data and they're just so like laser focused on that, they don't see the bigger picture of what's happening. Yes, you're going to start seeing less layoffs. It doesn't mean that the consumer's healthy. It doesn't mean that the economy's healthy. And, it just means that there's less people getting hired. And there's more people getting hired abroad. That's what that means. And so I fully expect that to maintain. So to everybody out there just going, oh, it's not as bad as it could be, or it's not as bad as 2009. Wait, just wait.
Mhm.
So we have to remember back in 2008, 2009, the whole GFC time period, there were real jobs still. You can still get a callback. Your job postings weren't all fake. Yes, you might have had one or two randos that, you didn't get anywhere with. but there were still real jobs. People still got hired. That is not the situation that we are in today, and that's not going to change. So, job postings go up because, earnings, and it's whatever that tactic they need to give the shareholders for that narrative to say, "Oh, look at the growth we're doing. It looks good. It makes, all the data look amazing, right?" But this is not this we are not in the same world as 2009. This is not the same world, and I think we've already gone past the point of return, to get back to what we remember. And I think that's almost like that 2018, 2019 pre-pandemic time period, where I talk to a lot of people and they're just like, I really wish we could just kind of go back to that because that just seems easier. And it really does, because think of what's gone on the last couple of years. I mean, it's just a little bit of insanity, especially from the consumer standpoint. And I actually also advise a credit company. So I see that consumer health a lot, and, and what their scores are, and what their
Mm.
collections are, and all that stuff, and where their revolving credit is, and auto delinquencies, everything that you can imagine. And, to watch their scores drop, just, taking the student loans. Yes, they didn't pay. Yes, you had all the emails and the contacts to know that it was coming, but they didn't. And I think it was just because, not blaming administrations, I think it was still a case. I think most people just thought, I think we were still on that pandemic, you got checks in the mail, and, oh, it'll just get taken care of. It'll get pushed down the road, kick the can down the road kind of concept. People ignored it. To watch people's credit score drop nearly 200 points because of that. They could be in the 700s and they're now in the 500s now. That is the reality. So you layer that upon, the jobs, the housing situation, the car loans, everything. It is, I always say, it's like, everything that I look at is like, it's like you just peel back layers of an onion, and eventually you are going to start crying, because where does it stop? Where does it end? How does it get better? And, so I hate looking at the consumer credit side. It's like, for the days they call me in for, that advisory, and just working with them, I'm just like, okay, get mentally ready for it all, because I know how bad it is, and I know how bad the jobs are. And, and you can see, what certain areas of the consumer, certain levels of the consumer, where they're at, what job prospects there are, knowing what I know. And I'm just like, gosh, they're probably like 6, 7 months out still. And, so there is this harsh reality. So the stuff that I post on X is actually fairly cheery. Um, I know most people don't think so. But believe me, what I see, you guys get the niceties, the realness. Let's put it this way, the realness that people can handle.
Well, I appreciate what you post. I definitely do. Being that tech person that's just looking for that inside data and doesn't have it, I really appreciate what you post. I also appreciate that you seem to be looking out for people. So you post about things like, I think you said the consumer credit score, the average like 550 right now. Is that true?
We're seeing it's the average is like, I think it's like 25% of people are under 650. Is so much worse than that, because I would say right now what we are seeing is probably somewhere between like a 585 and 620. Just not good. It's not saying that that's everybody. And yes, I work on a side of, consumer credit, which they do tend to have lower scores because something happened. But that is a big bulk of people. I think we get those weird skewed averages when you're looking at people with 750, 800s, that aren't utilizing credit, and they're not, they're that 1%, they're not the average American consumer. And I think it just skews so much. But when you look at the real person that is fighting the layoffs right now, yeah, I'd say that 600 mark you'd be doing pretty good, especially if you had student loans. You'd be doing pretty good, which is not good, So, yeah.
Well, that's really crazy, and, it starts to make me think about what comes next. I'm always thinking about what's coming next, and I don't really know how this is gonna play out when we're thinking about heading into, like I said, an easing cycle where the real estate market is essentially frozen. Nobody's selling homes. There's way more buyers than sellers, and prices are still super high. Like, they haven't really come down. They've leveled, they've tapered off the growth, but they're not coming down. They're still super high. And then we're gonna have all these people laid off. There's not good jobs out there. And they start firing up the money printer again. And you know what's gonna happen is like everything's gonna continue to tick up. But then nobody's gonna be able to afford living. The cost of living for the average person is gonna continue to get killed. Like hell, we're still 500 basis points above the Fed's inflation target, and they're turning on the printer already. They've thrown in the white flag. I don't see this ending well. How do you see this playing out?
Same. It's not it is, and that's why I said I think a lot of people just, like, wish we could just turn back the clocks a little bit to go, "Can we just get rid of whatever just happened for the last couple of years?" Because what? It's still making my head spin just to go, "Wait a minute, that was only that many years ago, and we were doing okay, and life was going on and on." Yes, we still had layoffs. Yes, there was still inflation and debt and, consumer issues, but we are just in a new realm of what's happening. There's gonna be certain sectors that are gonna do well. I have hope that companies will start actually providing the skills needed for their new roles as they start building in AI. Because, for the last 2 years, especially, HR has been all about, "Oh, we're gonna upskill you and reskill you." Tell I would love to meet somebody that has actually had that happen at their company, because that has not been the focus. Yeah, they might have gotten thrown a video and said, "Watch this. Go do this." And then, then you all of a sudden get a pip a few months later, because you're not doing it right. That has been the extent of what I've seen, but because of the changes happening, I do have a hope that once companies have figured it out and, we can have a slight level off period where we can learn and, maybe universities will even, finally change their tune and teach us what's relevant today and where companies are going. Maybe I have hope. I have hope. I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I have hope that something will change because companies are going to need specialists and they're not going to just shrink indefinitely. So something does have to give. It's just a matter of when and how bad off is the consumer going to be at that point and what is salary going to look like at that point and inflation and you name it. Like, I don't know. I don't know. That's yet to be decided, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me, but I keep on thinking holistically at this picture, and I think about, for example, Amazon, right? So they're talking about cutting 600,000 jobs essentially. I think this is new job growth they're planning on replacing with robots. But if you're, because how do I say this without getting in trouble? IQ is a bell curve, right? Sorry, it just is. It's distributed across the bell curve, and there are people that are on the left side, and there are people that are not going to be using AI, right? Like these are not highly skilled people. And what I'm seeing that scares me a little bit is this convergence of AI and robotics coming together. You're going to have, Elon's robots and whoever else, and you're already starting to see this sort of push towards doing manual labor with these agentic AIs enabled into robots, which is kind of terrifying if you're a blue collar worker, if you're a bricklayer, if you're building homes. I mean, granted, you're going to have fantastic improvements in productivity, but when you start talking about jobs, like things that low skilled workers can do, I see those being very risky. Like those jobs, I think they're going to evaporate. And then I start looking at that type of person, and I'm like, what else are you going to do as we further displace the lower end of that sort of bell curve? Like what does that mean for our economy?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And, and that's why I said I do have hope that something will change with that. Or, the other people that I've spoken to, like yourself, that have been in tech and things like that, yeah, you can see that change that will come. And we will see that growth. Now, the interesting thing, you brought up the Amazon with the 600,000 in their message about it, they did say that was US workers. That was specific. That was not global workforce. That was US workers. So that's a big giant red flag right there to say, okay, there's gonna be even more displaced because it's not that they're going to lay off people, it's just they're not gonna hire. And yes, that's over the years, but that's a big cut. And that's one company. Keep that in mind. That's one company. There's gonna be more companies utilizing robots and the agentic AI and things like that. It's interesting because I think there's a certain industries, finance is really focused on the agentic and changing the way banking, consumer, and personal products are working. And they were the people I spoke to last week in particular, any of the heads of Wall Street, really, they were really focusing on consultants, and I was just like, really, we're really gonna keep having them? But it's kind of interesting because we have McKinsey going, oh, we're gonna have a shortage of like what 300,000 consultants by 2030, and I'm like, yeah, no way. But hearing Wall Street talk about it, I'm like, okay, maybe that is where it's going. So they're bridging their gap like that. I think tech's going to have the specialists, the people that can work with AI, with the robots, and in that environment. But with everybody else, is it going to be a case of, we have that conversation right now of learn a trade. That might be where it goes. I do not buy that. I do not think that is a good idea. How many plumbers can you really have? And AI is there. There's already AI in every aspect of trades. And, and most people like right now are just like, oh, but I make this much money. I'm just like, yes, but you only have this much competition because nobody's doing trades right now. So when everybody now, this is going to be the same thing. They learn to code and now everybody jumped on it and now everybody's out of job. Well, everybody's going to jump into it and then it's going to be dog eat dog. And, the ones that are utilizing AI that are already in those trades or the ones that are coming into the trades that are fast enough to adopt AI, those are going to be the only ones that survive that. So I don't know, but I think the next couple of years are going to be interesting. But, like I said, I don't think that companies can perpetually decrease. We can't offshore everything. I mean, I guess we can, but I guess we could. But let's not go down that bad of a rabbit hole. But I do think that we are going to have this very transitionary time period where people are trying to figure out what to do, and with people being off work and looking for jobs right now. I think they're going to have to do what they have to do. And some are going to stay gigs, some will go trade. So hopefully it won't just get too over congested in one area. And then, yeah, like you said, like I mentioned earlier, those that can work on the AI and what these specialist roles are, do it because that is next level. And any younger people, I would suggest that is your sole focus is just learning what these companies need as specialists, no matter what industry you're in. Go be that go be that person that can shapeshift as the years go on because companies are going to keep evolving. AI is going to keep changing and it's going to keep changing what companies are doing. It's not like we're just in this short time period where we go, oh, okay, now we got AI locked in. Oh, okay, this is what the jobs are now. It is going to keep changing. So, and rapidly because as AI grows, everything just changes faster and faster. Look, the last couple of years how it's adjusted. Last year, AI is not going to take your job. This year, it's like, oh hi, we have AI, you're laid off. So what is it going to look like in 2 years? Even in just 2 years. So, yeah, a lot of big changes. We just got to stay ahead of it. And anybody that does have a talent in something, go focus on that big time and focus on what the future is for that talent as well.
Are you hearing any trends as far as useful application of AI by tech people? Because I hear the same thing from everybody I talk to at all the big tech companies is that there's this intense pressure from leadership to, it's even part of performance reviews. Hey, show me how you've been using AI in your job. And it feels a bit to me, and I've been around a really long time, like this is kind of like the dot com thing where everything in the world in the dot com right before the dot com bust was internet everything, and they could get massive valuations on these companies. They could just have e-commerce or something or internet or web or something in their description. They could just get tons of VC. um, and it was all bullshit, and the whole thing collapsed. And I'm starting to get whiffs of that, man. Like I'm sitting there going, like, this feels a lot like that. Like this mania. This is this Dutch tulip mania that
Mhm.
everyone is chasing, and they don't want. And every company is the same way. Well, we don't want to get left behind, so we have to go all in on AI too. And you see this crazy deal with like Oracle and OpenAI, this sort of circular finance ring that's just insane. And when you're on the inside, though, I don't see like this huge ROI, like that this push and what this promise of what it's going to deliver. At least not yet. I was seeing people chasing it, but I'm also seeing people doing it, I think, defensively, just to show like, hey, I'm a team player. Look at me. I'm AI. I've got these skills. So I guess my question is like, do you see any trends like as far as like companies that are like, hey, this is actually really helping in this area or that area? Or does it feel a little fluffy to you?
It's very fluffy. It's not a little fluffy. It's very fluffy. It's funny, the finance, Wall Street, I don't think they buy ROI with AI like that. There's very little, very little. They're like, we'll see some, but we don't know what the future is. And that was very clear. Speaking to everybody recently, and it's I Yeah, I think there's still gonna be I mentor startups, as well, and, they are just all about I swear they say AI more times in a sentence than humanly possible. And, there's not this big picture focus, for anybody, I think, right now that is working with it. I think there's very few. Um, so, yeah, where it's gonna go, I don't know. I think there's going to be some surprises. That whole, like, circular chain that's going on right now is getting a bit out of hand, and it does feel like, I mean, if you're not gonna say bubble with that, like, seriously, what else you gonna call it? Give me another name. I'll call it that. That's fine, but it's the same problem. Where's it gonna go? And I mean, you're just talking about passing 100 billion over to each other, and then they pass it along and it comes back to you. When's that going to end? I mean, there were new partnerships up today. It's kind of crazy. I saw Microsoft CEO today. He put out a statement, or over the weekend or whatever. He put out a statement saying, "Well, we see AI and the technological advancements really being akin to, when the changes in workforce, kind of the same as when we went from, like, fax into, like, email and Excel and things like that." I'm just like, yes, but y'all didn't lay off everybody by doing that because they didn't know. They weren't specialists in email. You didn't lay them off. So where does that leave us, overall? And so I saw that. My eyes rolled back as far as possible in my head. And, it's just very tone deaf. By a lot of the, big tech CEOs, and I don't expect that to change. So everything that we do see, everything that we do hear, I'd say take it with a grain of salt because we haven't had proof. We haven't had proof. I mean, I love AI. I think it's really incredible. I think it's an incredible technology. I think what we can do is incredible. We can advance a lot as a society, a global society, but from a workforce standpoint, it's not there yet. It's just not. It's just not. So I don't know. Maybe somebody else will figure it out and build it in so we can actually still have jobs. That would be cool. That'd be cool, right?
That would be cool. Uh, Let me go to something that maybe is a little bit more, something you can put some teeth into and some facts and some boundaries around or make predictions about. I see you talking about Google planning some layoffs coming up in 26. And I'm also hearing, I saw you on Twitter posting people worried about January layoffs and Amazon and other places. So what's coming? You seem to be really good at predicting this stuff. What should we expect coming up in early 26?
I am. I'm really good at predicting this stuff. Just did the Conoco one too. But it is a case of really looking at. So with Amazon, let's look at that one because that one just happened, okay? And they said it was about 14,000. Well, the rumor was everything that I can see is about 30K. Okay. Now I still nothing that I can see right now really affected AWS in a big way. I still have a prediction out that AWS is going to get hit. I'm talking like L7s, maybe 25% of L7s, 10% of AWS total by December with AWS. That might be pushing to January just by some of the current churn I'm seeing. But there are a lot of people that are really worried because that first number came out. They're not denying it. I mean, gosh, Amazon's not saying anything. And, staying nimble. I mean, that was the story, staying nimble. I'm like, kick them while they're down, you're laid off. Oh, no, we're going to stay nimble and we don't need you. Like, what is that? Um,
Hold on, Sue. But it was nimble, but
yeah,
also I think in the earnings call, Andy Jassy was like, "Well, this was actually about culture," and so
yes.
the messages seem to be incredibly mixed from the top.
Very. The staying nimble, I think, from Beth, what is it? I think her name was, put out the letter. And then, yeah, Andrew Jassy said he was just like, we want to operate like the world's largest startup. Okay, well, so you guys suck at hiring is what you're telling us. Because you knew that before. That's kind of always been a thing. That's not a new thing. And they did say this wasn't due to AI, this wasn't due to performance or money. This is due to culture. So again, so you guys don't know what you're doing as management, as leaders, can't hire. What is it? So yeah, that was quite interesting. So, and they just pushed the fact that they're going to stay lean and the importance of staying flat, which means, hey, guess what? There's not job growth. That's what that means. And that probably means there's not job growth in America. There will be job growth outside. I don't expect a massive headcount change, especially after this. But, optics are not their strong point. They don't seem to care, what people see, what people can understand what's going on. So, yeah, there's a lot of people that are worried about it. I have access to a couple different Discord channels and some other channels that have Amazon employees on top of everything that I'm looking at. People message me. I take most everything that everybody tells me. 99% of it is not true. Actually, probably higher than 99%. The closest to 100 you can get. But there's some things that I'm just like, they say something. And I'm just like, wait a minute, that actually matches this data. So then I go dig and I dive into it. Do I expect another 16,000 in January? No, but I do expect it through attrition and any kind of
Mm.
discharge exits there can be. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when you're talking about people just think about, job loss as layoffs that are big and in the news. No, there's mass amounts of people being let go every day. You're talking probably nearly 1 million discharges every month in the US. That is a lot. Nobody knows that. Nobody thinks about that. They're just like, oh, there's only like 600 people laid off at this place. Oh, that's nothing. Well, you add all of those nothings up, you have to talk about, we have what, 33 million businesses in the US? And yeah, most of them are not giant. They're not giant enterprises. But we have a lot of layoffs. We have a lot of discharges. A lot of companies really push for attrition. They push for PIPs. They push for reorging. So it makes it difficult, whether it's like, hey, we're going to relocate you. Oh, you can't go. Oh, well, we can give you a severance package then, and that makes the best deal. But that is what happens. People do not see that. They do not hear that. I do share some charts on X, mostly on my Substack or to my clients, but to show that hiring and exit levels. Because when you look at the exit levels, you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually what's happening. So when you see companies going, oh, yeah, we haven't had any layoffs this year, Meta, oh, we haven't had any significant layoffs. Well, no, you haven't had any significant layoffs, but you want to talk about your attrition and churn and discharges because holy cow,
Didn't
man.
Meta massively increase their PIP targets?
Yeah, they basically was just like, yeah, everybody. It was like a big hit over the summer. And yeah, they just changed everything. And, but they've been laying off like mad all year long. So it's not, again, it's not a layoff that needs a warn notice or it's going to be in the news. It's just like changing what they're doing. They're restructuring. They're doing it behind the scenes. They're smart. NVIDIA, people think nobody ever leaves NVIDIA. Let me tell you something. They have massive discharge levels and exits, and it isn't layoffs. And I wouldn't even say it's performance level because if you get hired at NVIDIA, I mean, you're working at one of the top companies in the world. You know, why are you leaving? Well, it's probably not on your own accord. You're probably not like, I don't like getting paid this much for working at the biggest company.
Don't like that massive stock appreciation. That sucks.
Right? So it's unlikely to be that. It is going to be so many other areas. And, NVIDIA is a weird anomaly. And I spoke to a Bloomberg reporter earlier this year. I'm just like, no, they're going to be letting go of about this many people this year. She's like, no, they're not going to have layoffs. I'm like, I didn't say layoffs. And she was like, oh, I can't do that story because that's not real. I'm like, no, if you leave a company, you still out of a job. It's still very real. And, so we have just stupid numbers of attrition of any kind, discharges of any kind at companies. So, anytime you see them going, oh, we're having layoffs or, oh, we're just going to let go of just these people. Well, they're doing a lot more behind the scenes, whether it's already happened or it's going to happen. Accenture, when they just announced their layoffs, they'd already happened. But the news, the press release made it sound like it was current. It's not current. It happened over the summer. Like you can actually see the exact headcount numbers over the summer from late June through August. And, so companies have a narrative. They have a way of, telling that different story. So yeah, it's fun looking at the data. It's frustrating to look at the data, but you do get to see the whole picture. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Some days I want to throw my laptop across the room because I'm just like, I give up. I'm done. We can't figure this out. Workers just need to realize they're not going to have a job. And that's that. And then some days I'm just like, no, let's go take this company down. And tell the true narrative, and yeah, it's wild stuff.
Well, I think one of the benefits of going through this is there's
Mhm.
been a lot of people in my industry that have been disabused of
Mm.
some of the internal narratives that your company cares about you, that you're valued in any way, shape, or form. And I think there's a lot of people that have gone to, and it sucks too, because on the inside you see people who historically have been really great teammates, and they want the best for the company. You know the way it is. There's camaraderie. There's it's a family environment in some of these teams. And they've just turned into like dead-eyed, complete. I don't want to say prostitute. That's maybe the wrong word, but there's certainly guns for hire. They're just like, nope, I'm here to do a job, and they're just completely turning into these almost quasi robots. They're just like, I'm here to make I'm here to make sure I don't get pipped out, and everybody else can go to hell. And it's really wrecked the culture, I think, in a lot of these tech companies. It's everybody's elbows out, everybody me first. And I don't like what I'm seeing. This has not been a great effect of this.
No, and you have to remember that even if you are that quasi robot, like you said, and I do see that, I do hear that from people, they are laying off top performers, like in sales, in product, in tech. It doesn't matter. The people at XAI that just got laid off, I mean, they had what, a team of 1,500? And, they gave them that assessment Thursday night, and Friday night at 5, they were let go. 500 were let go. They were really great at their job. It was just not where it was focused on. They wanted specialization. Within an hour, within an hour of letting go of everybody, the ads were already up for the specialist. That's the
Wow.
world we live in. So it's not work as hard as possible. And I fully agree. Yes, you need to do your job and focus on it. But we do have to think about jobs very differently now. It's not just because you're a top performer that you're going to stay there. So, get that out of your mindset. And something that, I advise a lot of people, think of jobs these days as a project. They're thinking of you as a project. Where we used to be, our parents had jobs for life, right? And, we are at that stage. And over the last like 10 years, it's gotten down to what? I think it's 3.4 years is average time at a company. And I would say that is way under right now. I would say that is probably less than 2 years. And, for whatever reason, it's not just layoffs or anything. But I would say, people are changing and things are happening and just life happens. And I think we are at about a 2-year stage, but we have to think about jobs as a project. So when you get hired somewhere, you need to start looking for another job because you could be laid off tomorrow. There were people at Amazon and Microsoft, the layoffs that happened this summer literally started day one that day and were laid off. I have their information. They actually sent me their
Wow.
documentation to prove it. And I'm not talking a few, I'm talking a lot. There was one team of 30 that the supervisor actually gave me all the details on, and that one was Microsoft. But yeah, it happened with Amazon too. I mean, this happens. You can get laid off same day you start, and and that just tells you like how bad hiring is. But we have to start thinking about jobs as like this contract work, not necessarily from the employers, although I do believe that they're going to start bringing us on more as contract work because it makes sense. There's not insurance, there's not benefits. You can let go at ease, right? Or it's just a certain time period. You know, I'm sure job offers will be made off of that as well. But we have to think about that to protect ourselves, as employees, no matter what industry you're in. Companies are building, they're changing, and then all of a sudden they see something bright, new, and shiny over there, and they're like, oh, I want that agentic AI. Oh, that person can't do it. We need to bring these specialists in. They're gonna let you go. And so as soon as you get into a job, start finding another one. And it's better for you to leave on your own accord and give your 2 weeks notice and be very grown up and professional about it than for them to just randomly lay you off and you're out of a job for 6+ months. Like, which scenario do you want to be in? I know a lot of people are just like, oh gosh, I can't imagine job searching like perpetually and like, continually. Well, you can have a really bad time being out of a job because the market's not fantastic, or you can do it on your own accord. Do it on your own accord. And, have that power, as much as you can have that power. It's still going to take you a long time to get hired, I'm sure, but hopefully you can beat that potential issue because companies are changing so quickly, especially in tech.
Yeah, and then you always worry too. This is my worry. Is like then you're the newest person. Sometimes do that LIFO thing, last in, first out. It's scary. Like jumping to some place like that where you're just a brand new person. You're the first person they could let go. Your RSUs haven't vested. Like that's a scary leap in this environment.
It is, and it happens, but it happens to people that have been there for 20 years too. So, right now companies are not caring. There's enough information that I've seen, um, some data I've seen, some systems I've seen to suggest that companies are utilizing AI for cuts. It's not that they're
Oh, you gotta be
choosing the
kidding me.
person, but they are, they are going, "Oh, here's where our ROI is." And that's what we have to think about. I mean, I get it. Companies have to, you're there to make them money. So if you're not making money, how beneficial are you to keep? But there are AI systems that are developing and going, "Oh, we should look at these people." And yes, then it's down to HR or the VPs, et cetera, to start going through that. Well, do they know you? Do they really know what you do? How good was your manager to write down your last performance review and actually do that? Because now they're utilizing AI. Because oh my gosh, don't even get me started on that one. But they are using it. They're so lazy, so it is very sloppy. It's very impersonable, and then you're just cut. I mean, what the director of AI, the head of AI at Microsoft got cut? What?
That's crazy.
And Microsoft didn't really hide the fact that they did utilize AI to help them make some decisions. It wasn't the final decisions, but your name got put in there. So, like, how good do you feel about that? Like, so it doesn't matter how long you've been there. To me, I can't imagine. I know I'm very lucky. I'm very humble about that. That I've actually never had a real job. Um, I've had my own business, but I've worked with so many that have gone through this. So I feel like I've been through every layoff in the last 20 years. And it's really it's hard. It's mentally exhausting. To do that, for everybody out there that has been laid off, I don't know how you guys are doing it, and my heart goes out to you because companies just don't care, and we have reached that point where I don't think they will care. I think something drastic would have to happen globally on, somebody pushed a big red button kind of thing for us to ever come back to the point of we rebuild companies again and that corporate culture. I used to always be a fan of corporate culture. I thought it was fascinating how it existed. And I have a lot of older books that are, from the 20s and 30s as it all started building and then how we started bringing in executive salary and how that came to be and how the disparity changed. I actually find that fascinating. So, corporate culture is actually interesting to me. We just don't run that anymore. It's run by boards and they put parameters on the CEOs that they don't even understand and are impossible to do. So I don't actually blame all the CEOs. I know a lot of people are just like, "Oh, we hate this person or hate the CEO of Amazon or hate the CEO of Microsoft." I'm like, they don't know what's actually going on. I have worked with so many CEOs, whether through consulting companies with what I do or, just helping them in their career. And I'm going to tell you right now, C-suites don't have a clue of what the big picture is of what's happening. They don't know that, Joe down the hall just got fired. They have no idea. None whatsoever. Is it hard as a business owner? Yes, I've run multiple companies with employees. Is it hard when you have to let somebody go? Yes, it is. Whether it's good or bad, it's still hard. You know, but, from a CEO standpoint, they really are not in that mix. It is the boards that are pressuring what happens. And, that is compounded by so many things, on how boards get made these days. But I hope someday we can go back to what was a really good working scenario. There's stability. And I think so many people want stability these days. Americans just want their jobs back. They want to know that they can have a home and they can have a family and do what they want and travel and not have to worry about being laid off tomorrow. Because that is what people are worried about. They're worried about, is tomorrow going to be the day? Am I going to wake up to an email in my inbox to go, "Hey, you have a meeting at 10?" Because that's the reality. And that's wrong. That is so wrong. But I don't know. I hope one day we can return to some normalcy on all of that.
Boy, I do too. I don't have a lot of hope for it though. I guess I'm just, yeah, I'm in engineering. I'm too good at math, and particularly, I'm not sure if you've paid attention to these metrics, but we're adding at the current trajectory about $450 billion, almost half $1 trillion every 28 days to national
28.
debt.
Wow.
Yeah, right. Like that's insane. Because
Insane.
I'm an old guy, but, like, I remember when George W. Bush was president and the total from George Washington all the way till I think Barack Obama took over, it was like 4.7 trillion. That's all the debt we accumulate. Now we're approaching 40, and then
My
the
God.
speed is picking up. And I think you know enough about finance. The way the bonds are structured is they're mostly short term. Like 80% of them are between like a 1 and a 10. They're constantly needing to be re-upped, and the interest rates are high. And even as the Fed cuts the funds rate, we're seeing the market puking on bonds. They're like, well, we don't really want to buy your debt. We don't believe that I'm going to get paid back with dollars that are worth anything approaching what I lent them to you at. And I don't see an out for that death spiral. I think that we're headed for a currency crisis. Like, I don't mean to be like Chicken Little, but I don't see the way this unwinds in anything other than a currency crisis where our debtors have to take a massive haircut and we have to restructure. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, it's not really my field to be, talk about a lot, but yeah, I think something has to give. And that is the easiest one to happen. Really, and it's not going to be easy. But, it's there. It's primed. It's ready, like you said. And, I don't think people are ready for what's to come. In a weird way, I'm kind of like, let's just do it. If we're going to do it, let's just do it. Can we just get it over with? It's a really weird thing, and I know I sound awful saying it because it's gonna affect so many people, I mean, myself included, but, you know, if we're gonna go down this path, we're in this path right now of just it's just bad. It's just elongating, and it's like that, with The Shining where you just keep going down the hallway, you know, and, it is that. Can we just do it and get it over with?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
move on.
that's not morbid to say. I think that there's that old phrase that, problems delayed are problems magnified. Like, the longer you wait to address them, the worse it's gonna be for you when you actually have to address them. So I'm in the same boat. It's like, we're already defaulting. Like, that's what inflation is. Inflation is a soft wave defaulting. It's like we're paying back our, bonds with money that's worth a shit ton less, when they come due. So why not just be honest about it? Let's just do a honest default, because I think that you're right. We will be much better off if we just go to living within our means, at least to some degree, because we're not voluntarily going to stop spending. So why not just default now? That's my view. But I'm one of those crazy people.
I'm with you on that one.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about the senior people that appear to be targeted. Do you have any information about that? Because one of the interesting things I noted, I can't remember who it was, maybe it was Amazon that said that they were going to be targeting not just L7 managers, like principal engineers and senior principals, which surprised me hearing that news. So, number one, what do you think is behind that? And number two, do you think that trend's going to continue?
Yes. Yes and yes. Yeah, yeah, I am seeing that right now. It is just the way they are reorging everything. When you're looking at the shift behind the scenes, you can see that. And again, I think this is just going to come down to that specialization. And I know they're the ones that are up there, but everything is changing where their focus is changing. And so unfortunately, yes, I think we're going to see some big cuts on that. We're going to see big changes. I wouldn't be surprised if we even saw a change on the structure. Like, we have the L5, L4s, L7s, whatever, you have everything. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that not necessarily evaporate completely, but totally change and change up the structure on what is going. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but I would say in the next maybe 18, 24 months, I would imagine something more is going to be different with it all, just because of what companies are doing. And Amazon in particular, um they're going through, like, a metamorphosis phase right now. But it's very behind the scenes. What I found interesting, like, this last layoff, it's very hard to find the right information. It's very hard to get the truth out, and everybody seemed to have a slightly different story of what happened. So to me, I'm just like, that's hiding a lot. That's hiding a lot in the structure because Microsoft one, I swear I had, like, 45 people within 30 minutes of getting laid off. They all messaged me, called me, whatever, and they had the exact same story. Got on the call 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on what level they were at. That was it. Same exact story. Amazon was not like that. I mean, the Amazon job kits are not done. They haven't even figured out how they're doing it in Europe yet. So, yeah,
Wait,
I
wait,
think we
wait, wait.
will
Let me back
see.
up. So they're not done with their layoffs in Europe now?
Mm-mm. It's been announced, but because the way you lay off in Europe is it has to be
Oh,
approved. and
Oh,
all
oh,
the
so that all
accounting
that
tools.
process, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a massive process. So somebody was just like, "Oh, well, this isn't happening in Europe." I'm like, "Yeah, give it a minute." You know what your laws are like. It's crazy. Actually think that the way Europe does careers and hiring and jobs, I think is actually incredible. And I wish they would do something like that in the US. It makes so much more sense. Particularly in like Germany or um the Netherlands.
Germany is like the worst, right? Like, I think German Workers' Council is like the most, stringent, with respect I'm not saying it's a I mean, it can be a bad thing, right? Because it's very I think they chase away a lot of business by making it such a pain to work there.
It is, but for the workers, it's actually good because, and especially like, I'm talking more white collar, more than like the industrial, which is just taking a beating right now. But you have, you kind of go in and especially like, I'm more on the Netherlands with all of this, but it's very similar with like Germany, Austria, France, and things like that. But you can go in, you're going to get a job, you're going to get a contract position. It's going to be like a temporary position, and after at the end of like whatever it is, it's usually 12 months at the end, you guys kind of do performance review of each other. And then if you guys like each other, then you can have a job offer. And it has to also get approved and things like that. But you're more solid. You're not just going to get laid off tomorrow. They're not worried about getting laid off tomorrow. I'm not, like I said, I'm not talking about blue collar. And even, I mean, the blue collar industrial side is not getting laid off tomorrow. This is everything that they've announced in Germany is kind of over the next several years. So it still has to get approved too. So, you do have that sense of security once you've kind of gone through your year. If it's good for you, good for them, then you get, a full time job. It makes a lot more sense than what we do here. When you have people being laid off on the day they start, what, 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 fire that recruiter, that hiring manager that brought them on. What were you thinking? Why were you even focusing on bringing somebody in if you in HR, you do know what's going on. And for all of the ones that say that they don't, oh, we weren't privy to that. Yes, you are, because I see how you get hired. HR gets hired en masse 5 to 6 months before layoffs typically. And so they do know what's going on. So why are you focusing on hiring the teams? And I get it. It's optics and you got to keep things up and things like that, but don't bring somebody in on the day they're getting fired as
Yeah,
well.
that's
Like,
terrible. I had
you
never
know,
heard that before.
message that have it like days ahead of time and go, "Oh yeah, sorry, we can't hire you now." That's a better blow than actually showing up to work and getting laid off.
Yeah, it
Um
seems like it's a trade-off with everything, though. I keep going back to Thomas Sowell. There's no solutions, only trade-offs. And, like, yeah, there's worker protections in Europe, but what I see is salaries are like a third for the same job over in Europe, and the taxes are through the roof in a lot of jurisdictions. Sometimes it's 65%. So, like, they're making nothing. And I think also companies are reticent to hire there because of those protections, because it's very difficult to move on from a worker, right? So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think you do chase away some potential opportunity by being so stringent with those worker protections.
Yeah, it is. It is. I still think overall in the good times, I think it's still a better option for a lot of people. At least, have that option available. I think that would be good. I think there's a lot less people. I think people would rather not deal with the stress of, am I getting fired this morning from an email? I don't want to check my email at midnight or 4 a.m. or, 6 a.m. Do I have a meeting at 9 that got popped into my Google Calendar? They don't want that. That's a level of stress that nobody should have to deal with. And that is the everyday worker stress these days. So, the thing is like, yes, I like that style of hiring. I think that's incredible. I think it's better. It's more secure. It's more secure for the employer and the worker during that time period of at least if it's a year, and then you can separate if you want to, or people that just like to change. I think that's a good way of doing it. But, we do have to look at, everything that is happening in the US. This is not just political. This is happening globally. These layoffs, these offshoring. And that's why, it all comes down to it's not a political thing. It's not an administrative thing. I get asked all the time. They're like, is it Biden? Is it Trump? It's neither. It's really neither. It's what companies are doing. And companies have been getting away with, for want of a better word, murder for years. They can do what they want. Oh, we're going to pay this fine. Cool. It's peanuts. The H-1B thing, 100K. It's nothing, so we have to look at that, but it is happening everywhere. This is why that corporate revolution this is a global situation that is happening. So everybody's going to start feeling this, at the end of the day, I think Europe has it a little bit better in this fact that They aren't worried about their job being let go tomorrow. You look at Volkswagen, they're like, "Oh, we're laying off, 30,000 by 2033." Okay, it's not today. It's over the course of time. So you have time to look for a job. There's a lot of differences with all of that. Today, you can be laid off tomorrow morning and you're just in the pool of whatever. And when you hit, 27 weeks, you don't exist in the unemployment level. You know, I there's a weird, you gotta have to weigh it up, and not everybody has the opportunity to go work in Europe or whatever, but there's just weird differences with everything, and I don't know, I hate the shifts that we're seeing because they're so great, and, no matter where you work, it's not great. The economy is not great anywhere. I don't think it's good anywhere globally. So, we're all in the same boat together, and, the corporates are at the same time reporting biggest earnings ever. I mean, what, last, Q3, what, I think 90% of the companies beat their earnings. That's, like, never happened. I'm just like, "Yeah, I believe it. I believe it." So, yeah.
Meanwhile, the consumer is getting absolutely murdered. Just
Yep,
doesn't make any sense.
yep.
I do want to pivot back though to what you said about H1s. I think the visa thing is a really important one. I think it's been very politicized. Trump wants to increase the fee for $100,000 per year per visa for H1B visa holders. I think they're new applicants, right? It doesn't apply to existing ones, right?
Yes, as far as we know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, TBD. It's super interesting because I paid attention, and I don't know if this is fact or not, but I heard through the grapevine that this round of layoffs that Amazon did, they predominantly impacted visa holders. Are you hearing the same thing?
No.
I heard that a
Um,
lot of L1s in particular had gotten.
they will. Every company will always be like, "Oh, yeah, we laid off Visa people too." It's like that, like, token thing that they say now. Microsoft was like, "Oh, no, we let go of H-1Bs as well." Cool. You still laid off this many Americans, and you're still hiring offshore. So, it's just one of those weird things that happens. Yes, I see it. I don't believe it was a lot. Um, you know, um, I haven't really dove into that side specifically. The visa thing is, I think it's a distraction. I really think it's a distraction. And, me. Yes, we have a lot of H-1Bs. We have a lot of L1s. We have a lot of visa holders. There's so many visas types. And, yes, that is a problem. And it is an optics problem when we have so many people out of work. And they're talking about, oh, no, we're bringing in really great STEM grads into the OPT program, and then they'll become H-1Bs and things like that. That's great. What about all of our American students, our kids? I have 9 kids. Most of them are in their 20s, and, some of them are in school. And, it's just like, what about them? They're getting overlooked because we are still bringing in so many H-1Bs. So yes, it is a problem. Overall, I do believe it's a distraction. When I go through, and I just did recently over the summer, I went through the Mag 7, and I basically did like a whole breakdown of, like, here's how many H-1Bs they have, here's how many offshore, nearshoring, I kind of put it together, and then here's how they're outsourcing. And when you look at the number, and here's how many American workers we have, right? So when you look at the numbers, Amazon, for instance, they have like 11,000 H-1Bs they brought in this last year. Well, when you look at their full H-1B number, or anybody on the visas, you can just take the whole visa. Um, it's like 10x, right? But their offshoring amount is like 40x. There's your problem. It's H-1Bs are the distraction. Honestly, visas are the distraction for companies just to be like, okay, yeah, oh yeah, make me pay 100K for a new person. Cool. It's peanuts. It's peanuts. It's nothing. And we see some companies, Walmart just announced that they're not going to bring on any more, people that need visa services, for now. For now, it wasn't indefinite, just for now. And it's not because Walmart can't afford, a couple million in fees for that. It's just how they're restructuring, how they're changing. But to me, the push on H-1Bs, and I was in a conversation today with on an X Space, actually, and I think the biggest issue we have is that everybody argues about H-1Bs and how bad they are, and they get really into it, the xenophobia, and they really focus on that, and I hate it. And and I post about H-1Bs, and I get a lot of comments about racism, and you're blocked immediately when that happens on my X. I'm not here for that. That's not what this is about. We're talking about this from a workforce standpoint, from a global workforce standpoint. Unfortunately, that whole conversation around visas is very heavily around that, and I hate that. But again, that is part of that distraction to make everybody go, "Okay, well, this is what's happening. Let's go hate on this." Well, let's not hate on that. Let's like hate on the corporations that are doing it because they're going to keep doing it. And this fee, they're not going to, they're going to pay it. It's going to be nothing. But while that's happening, they're still going to keep offshoring. They're not going to change. So we have to hate what they're doing, hate the motions of what's going on with all of that more than, yes, there's, people coming over and taking jobs out of, from Americans, companies 30, 40, 50x times how many H-1Bs a company has are offshoring that amount of people. That is American workers out of a job so that they can go put it somewhere else. Nearshoring, offshoring.
Yeah, I kind of
That's
think it's
the problem.
you nailed it. I think a lot of this is like an intentionally inflammatory wedge issue. The H1s get sort of tossed around because there's people like to tend to fall on certain teams, motivated by various nefarious things as you've called out. And I don't like that because I think you're right. It obscures maybe some larger trends and some bigger issues. And I've seen people what they have to go through to come here on a visa. It's incredibly complicated. It's very hard on their family, and I think a lot of people, listen, particularly that's why I asked the question around the layoffs, is that when you're on a visa in the United States and you get terminated, you have a short period of time to find a job somewhere else, and it's not even find any job. You actually have to find a job that is it's in concordance with what you came over here for. So whatever your
Exactly.
L1 or your H1B was approved for, you have to find that exact job at a different company, or you and your whole family have to pack up and go back to your country of origin, which is incredibly stressful and painful. You think it's bad being an American being laid off? That's I tell you, if you're on a visa, it is hell.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and that's exactly what people don't think about. And again, you deal with the people who are just like, I don't really care about them. Well, you should because if that's happening over in any country, okay, and workers are getting laid off in other countries. I mean, we're seeing those that were offshoring or outsourcing to American companies getting laid off now, and they're like, wait a minute, you know, and people are like, I don't care about that. No, we should because this is how corporates are treating workers. And when they think they can get away with that, how soon does that happen here? You know, and, I mean, think about it. Years ago, 5, 6 years ago, we didn't have Zoom calls to say you're laid off. You didn't get a memo to go, hi, yeah, thanks. But, we need the best workers. We didn't have that. So look at how fast culture changed to make that acceptable. And now we're seeing this other change. I posted something about Target. Somebody posted, I think it was what their brother sent them. They got laid off. They worked for Target in India. And there's like 1,000 people laid off, directors, VPs, and like 200 of them were brought down into a basement, which sounds really weird. But I understand how the different, hiring and situations over there. And they were let go, and immediately they couldn't go back upstairs. They were given their lunch because they're fed over there. And they were let go, and they were given Uber cab fare and like 1,000 rupees or something, which is like nothing. And then they were given like a month or two severance, depending on who they were. That was it. So this kind of stuff is happening everywhere, and this is happening by American corporations. So it's like I said, what they're doing in other countries, we should absolutely care because it's just a matter of time before they start making it even more cutthroat. We think it's bad now. I think they're not going to give us a hot lunch to take with us, or Uber Uber cab fare home. We're not going to get that. But how much worse is it going to get? And especially if we're thinking about companies that are looking at what healthcare costs now, which are just through the roof, right? Are they going to stop offering these benefit packages even for white collars? Are they going to pick us up more on these contract projects, which make it even easier to let go? Now it's just like, and done. That's cutthroat. That's cutthroat. Nobody wants that. And, I am worried about that. So, yes, when I do post things about other countries getting laid off, no, we really should be paying attention because if that's what's happening in China or Japan or India or anywhere in the world, it's just a matter before it hits here because that didn't used to happen there either. So, it is just how companies are feeling more comfortable in focusing on the margin, I guess. At the end of the day, that's what it is.
Yeah, and it seems like they like to move together too. I think there's some sort of group mentality with these companies. I don't know if it's like follow the leader or if they all sort of coordinate, but they get sort of this cover, I think. If you do this, one company does this horrible thing, a lot of people that I know be like, I really don't want to work there. That doesn't align with my values. But if all the companies are doing the exact same thing, and you're in a particular engineering, job family, is like, well, I only have a handful of companies that pay like this. Like, people are probably just going to be like, well, I guess I'm going to go with the least crappy option that's available to me. I see a bunch of that, and that's really sad. I don't I don't like that shift.
No, no, and that's not a good way to get a job either. You know, again, that yes, I think that's what the future might hold for us working on these project kind of concepts. But that's not a good way just to go, I'm going to go with the least crappy company that's hiring. It's like, what is that? That's not living. That's not life. Not that I'm like, oh, you have to have your passion in your job. You don't have to have that. Just like being able to do what you do on a daily basis and like the company you're doing it with. And, yeah, I think companies are, when they see a CEO do something, they're like, oh, they push that button. I can do that, you know? And then they see another one do that and they're like, oh, I can do that. And then you're going to start seeing that. So it is, they are trying to figure out what they can get away with. And they got some, hell of big legal teams behind the scene to go, you can do that. What are you going to get? Pushback? You're going to get sued? You're going to get sued anyway. Um, yeah, I think, yeah, companies are going to keep doing it. They're going to keep pushing the envelope until it's too far. But I don't know what that's going to look like or what they're going to do
Hmm.
when that happens. You
I I
know,
I think I see too far manifesting. I think we've paid attention probably to a lot of the cloud outages lately. I think you are going to cut people who you find to be superfluous and, "No, we don't need these. Hey, just get rid of them. We'll be fine." And then, like, the reality hits. These
uh,
people who've got this large scale institutional knowledge, have been here forever, knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. And then when things really hit the fan, everyone's looking around like, "Oh my gosh." And then things have been hitting the fan. We've seen massive outages, and Azure and AWS are impacting the entire global internet. And I think we'll see more of that. I think that trend's going to continue, and I think it's not just with cloud, but I think in these organizations, a lot of those sort of cracks are going to start to form over time, and I think the negative impacts will start to occur to these companies.
yep, absolutely. Jaguar Land Rover, they just had that big cybersecurity thing and they weren't insured and stuff like that. Like you said, yes, you have a certain amount of knowledge. Now, I think it was, gosh, I'm thinking back. Don't quote me on this one. I think it was in May and June, they let go of a pretty hefty number of cybersecurity and IT folks. Okay. The hack happened in August. They're saying is I think it was they said end of August, 1st September time. Well, in they had no hires in August, and in September they basically sent everybody home that happened at that one location. They're like, "Go home until we can figure this out. We want everybody to be safe." Blah blah blah. So people were paid, went home, and stuff like that. But after that, cybersecurity and IT teams that were let go, and I don't know how many was the team, just how many people. I've got how many people there was in September, they had, like, a mass hiring of cybersecurity. Like, nobody else in the company was hired except cybersecurity teams. I was just like, "There you have it." But again, this isn't in the news. This is why I love looking at the workforce data because they're gonna say, "This happened? Okay, I'm gonna go look at that team and go see, did they tick off somebody in cybersecurity to make that happen?" Also, who didn't check off on insurance? I mean, who these days does not have cybersecurity insurance? I mean, tell me that. And, when you're talking about a major company like that, somebody did something. It just feels like that. I have no proof, but yeah, you look at that, you look at the hiring and the workforce, and you're like, okay, sure, it was a hack. Sure.
Oh, I'm getting short on time, so I want to ask this. I really want to save this for the end. Is what do you see, since you're like Nostradamus here and you see things coming? Like, what is the broader trend? Like, maybe the top broad trend that's coming in our industry that nobody is seeing and nobody's preparing for?
For tech specifically, um, oh gosh, more layoffs? I don't think people
Oh,
have realized by how many. I know. You didn't ask for good news, you just asked for what I see. I do think we're gonna just see a big shift because companies are moving so fast with AI. They have no idea what they're doing. I kid you not, they just have no idea, and I hear a lot from a tech people that are like, "Oh, yeah, we've had to implement all this. It's crap." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." I hear it from enough people to go, "Okay, I'm gonna assume it's crap in most companies." But I would say there's going to be more, it won't necessarily be big layoffs, but it is going to be just that. We don't need you less hiring. Let's put it that way. We can just do that. I think it's going to get a bit more cutthroat for 2026. Um, I think there will be some pivots by some of the bigger companies towards the end of next year where they go, "Oh, yeah, I remember that team we used to have? That was cool. We should probably bring them in for this new project we're working on." So I do think we are going to see some of that, you know, the classic tech people that companies realize, "Oh, yeah, we can't do it without them, can we?" You know, and that's not something you just outsource easily. You do need, boots on the ground and people to actually fix it. I think we will see that. So I think for tech in general, I think it's going to be a tough 26. Not to say companies aren't hiring, but it is going to be that specialist level. So the more you can do right now, and I'm not talking about going to get certs or going back to school or anything like that. You're in tech. You know that doesn't necessarily make the difference in everything. Yes, you need to know what you're working on, but it's more important to know what the company is working on, how you can just understand that level of AI, whatever level it happens to be, whether it's agentic or otherwise, so that when you develop your resume, you can focus on what their future is. And when you go into that interview, you're talking about their current and their future. You're not talking about what you used to do. We used to have to just go, "Oh, yeah, I did this project and this project." It doesn't fly for tech anymore. So, I think if you can do that, you are going to stand out as candidates. But it's going to be hard for that, for tech industry, I think, for next year. We will see less layoffs, I think, overall, because there's not so many tech workers in the US right now. I think we will see more abroad. I think we will see more offshoring. I mean, we just saw Tata have 12,000, potentially 40,000, I think, laid off. But, I think tech is going to shift. And I think for tech workers, I think if you're smart enough right now, you can get into the logistics side, get into anything that can pivot into aviation or defense, aerospace. Your skills are vastly useful there as well. And in those are the industries that are going to grow. I mean, logistics is having a moment. Give it a few months. It will start peaking out a little bit. But defense and aerospace aviation, they need tech so much, they just don't know how to hire well for it, and they are trying to bring in a lot of AI stuff. And listening to the CEO of Archer the other day, at the conference I was at, he was talking about how we're at a point. I got a little fly around me. We're at a point where we might not have a pilot in a few years. I don't think he's talking like 3 years or something, but for certain flights, we might not have pilots. We might have engineers at the back of the plane dealing with the AI and the tech. There's a way to pivot your skills, and that doesn't need a specialist. That just needs somebody that can think outside the box. And I know all you tech people. I primarily wrote for tech over the years of working for people with career, in their careers. I'm primarily focused on tech, and you guys are really, really clever. So you guys can do those jobs. You have to pivot outside of the typical tech industry, the typical big tech industry. Look at everything else, and those will be good jobs, and they pay well. Aviation, aerospace, defense, they pay well. So, think outside the terms of working at the FANG companies for sure, because they're going to keep doing what they're going to keep doing, and it's going to be a mess. It's just going to be a mess for a while. But there are a lot of opportunities out there. You just have to be different and stand out differently.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasant conversation, such a departure from what I usually talk about, and I really enjoyed it. Why don't you tell everyone where they can find you in case they're not aware?
Yeah. You can catch me on X. I'm the Job Chick, CHICK. And you can go to my website, thejobchick.com, if you want to connect there as well. I do a lot of consulting and work with investors and things like that. But yeah, other than that, I kind of live on X. You know that.
Yep.
So I try to put all the good stuff out on there and try to give people a heads up of what's coming as well.
Awesome. Yeah, everybody give Amanda a follow. She's one of my favorite follows on X. Really appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This has been great. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.